Good evening. Today is the 12th day of November 2015, and we are continuing with our explorations in Savitri with Dr. Alok Pandey. We are still on Book 1, Canto 5, going into it, as Mother told me, slowly, very slowly. And each week as we prepare to open Savitri, I read something from Mother. This is the continuation of her talk to a sadhak. But you must not read it as you read other books or newspapers. You must read with an empty head, a blank and vacant mind, without there being any other thought. You must concentrate much, remain empty, calm, and open. Then the words, rhythms, vibrations will penetrate directly to this white page, will put their stamp upon the brain, will explain themselves without your making any effort. Savitri alone is sufficient to make you climb to the highest peaks. If truly one knows how to meditate upon Savitri, one will receive all the help one needs. For him who wishes to follow this path, it is a concrete help, as though the Lord himself were taking you by the hand and leading you to the destined goal. And then every question, however personal it may be, has its answer here. Every difficulty finds its solution herein. Indeed, there is necessary for doing the yoga. I believe it was that is necessary for doing the yoga. Typo. So, begin. We're on page 89.
Yes. We had paused at this line, tying with diamond threads the spirit's extremes. So Ashupati stands on the doors or the gates of the supermind, as it were. He has entered that portico where all the worlds and their energies meet. And one step beyond, and they change themselves and enter into the house of the One who is infinite, the thousandfold house of God. So he stands there and scans the entire creation from top to bottom, a creation which is one even in its difference and multiplicity, and it is tied by diamond threads. These threads are not seen to us. We see small parts of a vast cosmic chain, and we don't realize that they are inextricably linked and connected to each other. And that is what is called as ignorance. And very interestingly, the spirit's extremes. So we are too much attuned to thinking that the spirit is what is beyond, but the spirit also is what is right down below. So this entire creation, from its base and plinth to the apex and the heights, is the One. And these are the poles or these extremes of the spirit in which it has entered for the sake of the play. What this play is about, what meaning does it contain for us, how we have to orient ourselves and move further, that comes later on. But right now it's just an overview. And what a grand panoramic view, much before the panoramic views of the cameras were devised. Here is a panoramic view where Ashupati in one single glance sees the entire ladder of creation. That's what is being described here, and will continue on the next book. In this drop from consciousness to consciousness, each leaned on the occult inconscient's power, the fountain of its needed ignorance. So, ignorance is necessary lest too early creation escapes into the supreme and there is no real evolution. So, it provides the resistance to the evolution, and a resistance which eventually ends up making into a more perfect flowering. So, on one extreme is the inconscient, and as creation emerges, it emerges step by step, degree by degree, filling the world with the wonder of multiplicity, because the inconscient would not allow it to emerge easily. So it plays a role. That's why it is a needed ignorance. It's like when a seed is put inside the ground, it has a hard shell. It is needed because it protects the seed from getting burnt by too much light.
It's very interesting because one time Mother said to me, she raised her hand like she was talking about the gardens of Matramandya. She raises her hand and she says, "One must know how to move from consciousness to consciousness." And here we see a drop from consciousness to consciousness.
So level by level, layer by layer, and it's necessary because otherwise it won't be possible to have any evolution. And how much ever we may curse it, well, there is a purpose behind it. Archmason of the limits by which it lives. It's a very interesting word. If we search for the meaning of archmason, it takes you to Freemasonry, in which there are archmasons, like archbishops.
Yes.
But if you apply a kind of an common sense approach, which one should not when it comes to meanings, well, masons are those who build. And archmason, somebody who like a master builder or like a head,
yes,
who really sets limits and builds it. So it's a very interesting word. Archmason of the limits by which it lives. So inconscient draws a circle, and human beings and animals and bird and beast, everything is trapped within that, and it won't allow us to venture further. It will fill our minds with doubts, all kinds of suggestions. This cannot be, that cannot be. And so in our struggle with the inconscient that surrounds the human consciousness, you have to struggle with these things. It sets limits to our beliefs, limits to what can be and what cannot be. And therefore it keeps everything within its safe limits. In this soar from consciousness to consciousness, each lifted tops to that from which it came, origin of all that it had ever been, and home of all that it could still become. So mind lifting up towards supermind. Supermind is the origin of mind. Supermind, from there mind has come and now it has become ignorant. And supermind is the destiny of the mind to become. So it comes from that and it goes back to that. It's destiny to become that. But this is now a gradual process. Each one is leading to the next level from which it has come. So matter has come from life, and therefore its life encases itself, limits itself, and becomes matter. Of course, in its origin it is consciousness force. That's right. But what I meant is that in its evolutionary journey, matter first releases life.
Yes.
And then it releases mind, because each level becomes the other by a process of involution. And it is necessary so that the evolution can be a graded process. In its origin, life, just as mind is from supramental plane, life is from consciousness force, and matter from the pure existent. But in the process of evolution, and Sri Aurobindo says that very interestingly, in one of his commentaries on the Upanishads, he says that as long as scientists are trying to see how matter can be organized or conditions created so that it can become living, they will not succeed. They will succeed when they learn how life became matter.
How life became matter.
Yes. And that in the next canto of the next book is described, that how it plunged into the darkness, and suddenly, if you look at it like this from another point of view, it's like a bird which was flying suddenly dropped into a net or a cage and was stiffened so that it couldn't move. So, if we see from an evolutionary perspective, the moment life plunged into inconscient, it found itself clamped, it couldn't move, couldn't fly, couldn't breathe. All that was it could do was to pulsate as waves or particles inside matter. That's how matter is formed. So when scientists get that secret, then they will be able to know how to create life out of matter. And there are, I'm sure, stories of Sri Aurobindo and the mother where they knew how to do it,
Yes.
to transmute it. But like many powers, like last time we were speaking about mantra of life, they would not use it because it's not good, it's not safe. Like Pavitrada, who had discovered the secret of uh, making a nuclear bomb on the tip of an arrowhead. And the mother had told him, "You know it, I know it, that should be the end of it." Because, how dangerous it could be.
Interesting, Madhav once said to me, and I know you know this very well, he said, any leap in the evolution is preceded by an involution.
Yes. Even at an individual evolutionary level.
Yes.
Every time you have to take a leap for the next level, you have to get down, you have to clear the ground. The mother says you have to make a clearing of certain things which are holding you back, and then you are lifted to a greater height. And there is a beautiful image of this in the Vedas. So the image is that if you have, you stand on a hilltop and you see the next peak. So that peak is wonderful. Like, from Tiger Hill in Darjeeling, you see Kanchenjunga.
Yes.
So Tiger Hill is about, I think, 9,000 feet.
Yes.
Darjeeling may be around 6, but Tiger Hill is another 2-3,000. From there you see Kanchenjunga, which may be around definitely over 18,000 feet, 18,000 feet. But if you have to go from there to Kanchenjunga, you have to come down all the way, find the route and access it.
To the plains.
Yes,
10,
to the
10,000
plains.
feet
Yes,
below.
it's interesting that,
Yes,
and that's the
yes.
process of all evolution. So again, if you see again at another level, the wings of the birds must be clipped and it falls on the ground to develop into a 4-footed animal. The many legs of a crawling snake have to be chopped off so that it can develop wings to fly. The fish has to feel suffocated inside the water where it could breathe freely to become a creature of the land. And by analogy, man will lose this capacity, excessive misuse, abuse of the intellect to develop intuition. If he thinks that only by its use he can develop, because reason will take him to a point and then make him move in that circle again and again and again. So, this involution is so true and it works at many levels. It's not just at the origin, it's at every time there has to be a progress. This is part of the whole, this is how it works. And if one is afraid to lose that which one holds as dearest and highest in oneself, then one is not ready to go further. This is the other part. Now comes music. An organ scale of the eternal's acts. What are his acts but a poem in creation? Mounting to their climax in an endless calm, pieces of the many visaged wonderful, predestined stadia of the evolving way, measures of the stature of the growing soul. So, this is the way he has planned the evolutionary journey. And we cannot take a leap. Sri Aurobindo repeatedly cautions in the Synthesis of Yoga. He says that, gives an example of Sri Ramakrishna. And he says that is not an example for everybody to follow. You can't storm into the kingdom of heaven. You can't leap from animality to superhumanity. There is in between a stage of an evolving humanity. And if one feels one can just do away with it, then one is simply pulling oneself, one will fall into back to the abyss. So each stadia predestined. Yes. They interpreted existence to itself and mediating twixt the heights and deeps, united the veiled married opposites and linked creation to the ineffable. See, passingly, Sri Aurobindo beautifully uses the word heights and deeps together. And an image that flashed across my mind when I had read this. Normally, when we think of steps like this, and in between, of course, there are houses like Golkund where it is all blank, like Sachidanand all around. But these are steps which are almost like curved. So, there is a depth behind depth. Each height also ends up into an equivalent depth. So, we can climb this staircase and arrive at that, or we can go deeper and deeper and arrive at that. It is enclosed in such a way.
And what of the spiral?
Yes, of course. That is the evolutionary process. That's where the involution is necessary.
Yes.
And then the next evolution takes place. So this is another part which, since we speak about the spiral and we have just read about drop of consciousness and the involution and the evolution. See, many people compare Sri Aurobindo's writings to the Gita and the Veda and, the past. Well, all that is fine. And for a moment, let us leave aside the fact that, specifically the Gita, because it's one of the mightiest scriptures before Sri Aurobindo. It doesn't speak about transformation, doesn't speak about the transformation of the instruments and the gunas. But even if we leave aside that, if we just take it it's a Vedantic scripture and Sri Aurobindo has Vedanta and the Tantra combined in it. Yet there are many problems of humanity, many discoveries which are not anticipated. Because between the time of the Gita and today, the many things that have happened in the field of pure science, many things have happened in the march of civilization, and mankind wants that also to be included in the synthesis. The synthesis of the Gita takes up humanity as it was at that point of time. It takes up the Sankhya, it takes up the tendency to become otherworldly.
At that time.
But there are many things which have happened in between which need an answer, and Sri Aurobindo is the answer. So, each has its own place, but we should not forget that Sri Aurobindo is far more contemporary and contextual, to use because in between there was much that happened. The spiral went down and came up, and we need to know what was it and what was its purpose.
And then mother.
Yes, of course. What can one say about her? Yeah. And then, of course, as we said, standing on the doors of the supermind, he sees. See, it's interesting. Sri Aurobindo from this point will take a plunge back to matter. That starts from next book. Because he will not go into an individual transformation. He will renounce it. And he will come back, start from kingdoms of the subtle matter. Because now he is doing it as a representative of the race. You see, it's very clear here in Ashupati's Yoga. A last high world was seen where all worlds meet. In its summit gleam, where night is not nor sleep. The light began of the Trinity Supreme, the Sachidanand. Yes. So he's already, Ashupati has reached that point in his yoga.
But he sees it.
He sees it. And he could just take a leap.
Yes.
He has gone to that point and he could just take the plunge. And people won't understand. They would ask Sri Aurobindo, you wrote about the supermind at so and so time. You had not, then you say that you have not yet achieved it. So how could you write about it? And Sri Aurobindo, with his utter humility, he doesn't say, oh, I could have just achieved it in one leap, but I renounce for you people. I mean, he doesn't say that. He says, gosh, he puts a very logical query. You can't write about a thing unless you achieve it. You can see it, you can experience it, you can feel it, and you can know it. he doesn't say, it's mother who says that, he made the renunciation, the sacrifice, really a supreme sacrifice. He stands on those gates, and that's why it took him 10 years to climb into the lowest layers of the supermind, because from that time onwards, with his cosmic consciousness, he included the creation, every possible element, and he was carrying it. And that's why the ashram, which grew over a period of time, became a reflection of the totality of the universe, because Shri Aurobindo is the totality of creation. So everything that was there started getting extended through people, personas, this, that. So it is an amazing work, a whole chapter which,
Working not only on the good, but on
yes,
the
everything,
darker
everything.
forms.
Actually, in that consciousness, it's a single sweep.
Yeah.
It's from here to there. All there discovered what it seeks for here. We seek for what? We seek for existence. That's why we use the word struggle for survival. There it is self existent. No harm, no risk, no damage, no death, no disintegration. We seek for consciousness and we seek for power. There it is consciousness, force, chit tapas, shakti of the Supreme. We seek for joy, and invariably it is marred by sorrow and suffering. There it is the pure, unadulterated, unmixed bliss of being. So all that we seek and struggle for here, there it is self existent, self fulfilled. All there discovered what it seeks for here. It freed the finite into boundlessness and rose into its own eternities. There is another place where Sri Aurobindo speaks about in Savitri, each part in us desires its own absolute. Every movement of nature has its own perfection and fulfillment. And there it's self-fulfilled.
And mother's work on the cells.
Yes.
That they were aspiring.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. The inconscient found its heart of consciousness. This is part of our burden which all of us must bear. This is the cross which one must bear. So called, looked superficially, it is the cross of suffering and pain. Looked at another way, it is the price that we must pay for the evolution. But from the deepest angle, we must carry our own share of darkness so that it can be transformed into light. Otherwise, we are not doing a good job. Mother says at one place, someone even asked me recently that what does Swami Vivekananda means when he says, resist not evil. Swami Vivekananda very interestingly said that when I read the Paradise Lost, the only character I admired was Satan. He says the fellow had the guts to revolt. Of course, he was an incarnation of Shiva. And Shiva loves the titans also, titanic energies. So it was too powerful a statement, coming from Swami Vivekananda. So I was asked that, what could it mean? So then, Mother and Sri Aurobindo's writings, where Sri Aurobindo himself says, admire also the titan. Yes. If I cannot be Rama, I would be Ravana. There are series of aphorisms with Mother's commentaries. Yes. And at one place, Mother says, do not try to be among the holy and the pure. Take your own burden of the anti-divine. These are her words. So that it can be offered. Those who try to walk among the holy and the pure with a mask of self-righteousness, they don't realize that all the darkness is within and it has taken this form now.
And it's the most dangerous
Because
it's suppression.
So each one has to carry it in whatever measure and offer it. Not to indulge and become that, but it is a part one has to bear. Yes. It has to go on till the final stages of transformation. The idea and feeling groping in ignorance at last clutched passionately the body of truth. We only have the idea of truth, the feeling of truth. We have imaginary visages of truth. What is that body of truth? That we have to clutch.
And now music.
Yes, there's a lot of music in this part.
Yes.
The music born in matter silences, plugged nude out of the ineffable's fathomlessness, the meaning it had held but could not voice, the perfect rhythm now only sometimes dreamed, an answer brought to the tone earth's hungry need, rending the night that had concealed the unknown. See this music, it's very interesting. If you take music as vibrations and waves, if you take music, that's the essence of music. All the rest, hearing it, sound, it is a different thing. But in matter, each atom, each electron is vibrating with a tremendous intensity. And the amazing part is that it is randomly vibrating. It is not, it doesn't have a mind to organize itself. And yet, how beautifully it creates a creation out of nothingness. What is that? It's nothing but music. We can't hear it. We can only hear gross instruments, the guitar, the sitar. But this is music in the depths of matter, inaudible to the human ear. And yet it is there. And he has found that music, and once it is found, that heart of night is torn.
Rending.
Rending, it's a very powerful word. Giving to her lost, forgotten soul. A grand solution closed the long impasse in which the heights of mortal efforts end. This is the impasse. Try it. Try to meditate. Try to do good deeds. Try to remember and offer. There is a limit to mortal effort. Try to many things. We want to be a good artist. We want to be a good painter or musician or poet. There is a point up to which we go. Beyond it, you feel it could be better. Something more, something more, something more. But you can't. It's the height of mortal effort. A great seer like Vyasa, who composed the Puranas and compiled the Vedas and of course the Mahabharata, it is said that he was still not happy, that there is something he has not yet manifested. He doesn't know what. Till Narada comes and says, you have talked about everything except the birth of God in time. So then he brings out the Bhagavad. So this is where we have that there is a limit to mortal effort. And Ashupati has reached that point where he sees the grand solution. There is something beyond. That is what we need to get at. A reconciling wisdom looked on life. Reconciling wisdom. Not a wisdom that rejects life, but gives a sense, meaning and purpose to each curve and line, to each little point in our destiny, to each twist and turn of fate. It fills with a new sense. So that's a reconciling wisdom, not a wisdom which, okay, there is a wisdom on high, but it has nothing to do with life. Reconciling wisdom looked on life. It took the striving undertones of mind and took the confused refrain of human hopes. So the music continues. Refrain. So after every, of human hopes, after every little, paragraph, we end up with the same refrain of human hopes. We cannot, go beyond it. And made of them a sweet and happy call. So this is what should happen. Instead of simply hoping and despairing and hoping and despairing, we should turn everything into a call, a sweet call towards the divine. As matter calls. At one place the mother says that, people with these atom bombs and everything, they have war machines and all, human beings have trampled upon matter and totally, massacred it. And Therefore, there was a cry in matter for intervention. And then she speaks about that wherever we have placed our feet, we have sent into matter vibrations of hope and solace, which will remain imprinted upon it. We read it in the Puranas, earth going and aspiring to the divine for intervention.
I remember Mother talks about nuclear.
Yes.
And she says it's a force of destruction.
Absolutely. Disintegration.
So fission is not the answer, but fusion.
Fusion. Energy by fusion. She could know it by the smell that they have tested nuclear bombs.
Yeah.
She was not happy because this disintegration of matter. It lifted, these lovely lines, it lifted from an underground of pain the inarticulate murmur of our lives and found for it a sense illimitable. Is there a meaning in our pain? Sense illimitable.
Yes.
Perhaps at one place he says, pain is better than pleasure because pleasure is very deceptive. Whereas pain is something which still reminds us, codes us, helps us to move on.
And further on, long after, he says, pain is the hammer of the gods,
to break
a dull resistance
in the human heart. In mighty oneness, its perpetual theme. It caught the soul's faint, scattered utterances, read hardly twixt our lines of rigid thought, or mid this drowse and coma on matter's breast, heard like disjointed mutterings in sleep. Really, if we look at life, there are hardly few moments. I'm talking of an average life, not something touched by the hand of grace. But if you really look at life, there are few moments scattered which can be called as soul moments. And in between, we have matter's drowse, its coma, where something is sleep, we mutter as if, and soon we forget. Or in rigid thought, something escapes, something of that light, but that's it, lost in the rigid boundaries of thought and the cabin of the idea. So that rediscovers its totality, mighty oneness. It grouped the golden links that they had lost and showed to them their divine unity, saving from the error of divided self, the deep spiritual cry in all that is. At one place, I think it is Parbrahman, but maybe next time I'll reconfirm. Sri Aurobindo speaks about all the events that are happening in just 3-4 lines in this earth, and then he says, are divine moments. These are divine moments. Everything is a divine moment. It's connected by a continuous golden link, but we don't see it. Because the ego shuts us back into our little self and our little worries and little concerns. All the great words that toil to express the one. This is a marvelous line. At the end of all the great words that toiled to express the one. Great words. Leave aside ordinary words and sentences and lectures and, essays and books. The great words, some of the most powerful formulas. Soham asmi, tattvamasi, thou art that, om, ekoham onkar. So many ways. All the great words that toiled, still they cannot, to express the one, were lifted into an absoluteness of light and ever burning revelation's fire and the immortality of the eternal voice. Suddenly they find the release into that grand revelation. And what follows is amazing. There was no quarrel more of truth with truth. We had heard only of quarrel between truth and falsehood. But truth also with truth, the gods quarrel. because each god wants to expand his own domain, and for him, his own energy is absolute. For Shiva, the destruction of all that is imperfect, that's the absolute truth. For Vishnu, preserving all that still can grow into perfection is his truth. And sometimes there is a conflict even between the two. And then, of course, a reconciling moment comes. But this is how even the great gods, they don't quarrel, of course, like us in a fish market. But their quarrel is very subtle and gentle. We see in Trojan War, where there are gods who are, Pallas Athene, for instance, with, Odysseus and Menelaus and all these people. And Apollo is with Paris, and so, both are great god. I mean, he's a god, she's a goddess, and he's a god, and both are great in their own right. Apollo is the sun god, and Pallas Athene is Maheshwari, no less. And they are at conflict with each other. So Zeus has to tell, look, whatever it be, I have decided. So Apollo, you have to withdraw. And yet, he makes sure that Achilles falls, shooting the arrow at his feet. So, even the gods, because each truth has its own place in time, where it must manifest itself in its absoluteness. And yet, after a certain time, it must give way to a still higher truth. That becomes a problem. So, but there, everything ceased. There was no quarrel more of truth with truth. The endless chapter of their differences, endless chapter, retold in light by an omniscient scribe. So they were settled. That look, and why this is, it's very interesting. The next line which follows, traveled through difference towards unity. It reminded me of, there is a letter of Sri Aurobindo on the mother, well-known letter. Now it is chapter 3 of the book on the mother. To walk through life.
Yes.
To walk through life armored against all fear, peril and disaster. Only two things are needed. Two that go always together. On your side, an inner state made up of faith, sincerity and surrender, and the grace of the Divine Mother. These are the two things needed. Now you see, walk through life. Now this through difference, this is necessary because they end up strengthening each other. So when gods quarrel, when there is a quarrel of truths, difference of truth, opposition of truth, they eventually bring out a greater and greater strength. It is beautifully shown in one of the stories in Shiv Puran. So Vishnu has been moved by one of his set of devotees who are basically denizens of the nether world. They are celestial beings, apsaras, who have taken home there, and they pray to Vishnu and they ask him for an impossible boon, that we want to serve you as Lakshmi does. So he goes there, he says, all right, as the devotee asks, and so naturally, as he is with them, he loses his highest status, forgets himself, and he is completely lost in that state of consciousness. So now Shiva has to go and rescue him. So how does Shiva rescue is very interesting. Shiva goes and challenges him to a fight. So he's not interested in fight. He doesn't even know what's happening. So then Shiva tries to threaten these four ladies. And he gets up and he wants to fight. So Shiva gradually increases the weapons, the level of the fight, and Vishnu begins to recover his inner strength more and more. Because that is the challenge thrown at him and he must bring out. And eventually he recovers his full self and says, oh, what is it? Where am I? So you see, it's very interesting that this difference between truth and truth is also necessary as part of the evolutionary journey. But when we reach there, then it ceases. It's no more needed. Mind's winding search lost every tinge of doubt, led to its end by an all-seeing speech that garbed the initial and original thought with the finality of an ultimate phrase. So all, it was like the punchline. We talk about the first line, but there is something which is yet to come, and that justifies everything. And that phrase, which will close the whole thing, I am the one thing which I remember is the Gita, the finality of a phrase. Read the Gita, and there are a lot of people who explain, and each one true in its own right, and there is a delight in the whole journey. How Gita ends, it's very interesting. So after the whole thing is over, the whole jnana has been given to Arjuna. So now Dhritarashtra, now he's a blind fellow, blind by ignorance, arrogance, and everything, attachment, pride. He says all that is fine, but what is this? Krishna is telling us to war and everything. So, of course, the Gita doesn't speak about this speech, but it's there. So then it ends up by one sloka of Sanjay, which summarizes it. He says, one thing I know for sure. Forget about all the rest. One thing I know for sure. Wherever there is Arjuna and wherever there is Krishna and the two come together, there is victory. There is truth. There is yash. There is triumph of light and truth. That one half of phrase summarizes the whole thing so beautifully. That an instrument open and surrendered, and the divine blessing and the grace, there is victory. So that last closing phrase which explains everything, the whole Mahabharata will just basically justify this truth, not the other things. Other things are all right.
Yes.
But this one truth, it will justify, or the greatest of secret which comes at the end. Surrender unto me.
Yes.
Mamekam sharanam raja. Sarva dharman parityajya mamekam sharanam raja. Aham tva sarva papebhyo moksha ishyami masucha. This one sloka summarizes the rest. All this is fine, I have told you, but I am giving you the greatest of secrets. Sri Aurobindo speaks about it as the greatest of secrets. Of the three secrets in the Gita, the greatest of secrets. So we have this one phrase. Mind's winding search lost every tinge of doubt. Indeed, in the Gita it ends like that. That now all my doubts are torn asunder. Arjuna says that. Led to its end by an all-seeing speech. The speech of the divine. All-seeing speech leading it to that point. That garb the initial and original thought with the finality of an ultimate phrase. So it starts in the beginning that look, this is my command, do it. And then it goes through, reveals eventually for the grand revelation with the finality of an ultimate phrase. So that phrase sums up everything. So we will stop here.
And you can recite perhaps the first line of the mother. There are two things.
Yes, that alone
can affect in their conjunction
the great
and difficult thing, which is the aim of our endeavor, a fixed and unfailing aspiration that calls from below, and a supreme grace from above that answers.
And we have a clue to that here. The clue was that people often ask how to aspire all the time. That's a wrong way to approach it. Turn everything into an aspiration. If you are weeping, turn it into aspiration. If you are in pain, turn it into aspiration. If you are in a state of joy, turn that into an aspiration. That is the way.